Armor toughness is now on Bedrock, lightning rods can come in multiple colours, and we have some interesting changes being made so that Java matches Bedrock rather than the other way around for once. This is 1.21.110, what we are calling the Copper Drop, and hello, I'm AbyaxToyCat. Let's talk about it for today's beta preview video, which will actually come to you in 5 parts, and so let's start with part 1, which relates to one of the biggest sources of inconsistencies in the Copper block palette, because Copper lightning rods, also just known as lightning rods, for a while have been the only block which don't follow usual oxidation rules. This is something that is important because we have copper golems, but basically every copper item in the game has 8 variants. There's the regular one, for say cut copper stairs here, then there is the exposed cut copper stairs, the weathered cut copper stairs, then the oxidized. Each of the 4 oxidation states, and then there's whether it's waxed or not. This, by the way, is, if you've ever wondered why waxed lightly weathered cut copper stairs went, it's actually waxed exposed cut copper stairs now, but there are 8 variants of every single placeable copper item, which is why we have so many of these different blocks. However, lightning rods were immune for this until they added the copper golem, where they actually have lightning rods in the design, and so why can their lightning rod oxidize but your one couldn't? This was the situation before, and this is the situation now, where your lightly weathered, or indeed exposed, copper golem can have a matching armor stand, or matching lightning rod, and the same is true for a fully oxidized one, which is great because building with these is lots of fun, but it also means if you have a lightning rod in your world, it isn't going to be waxed, because why would it be? And so if you don't watch them after this update, you'll notice they slowly might start to oxidize, and so as someone who's built a giant orange tunnel out of these, I might eventually find that my orange tunnel becomes a blue tunnel. Speaking of weird tunnels, let's talk now about the second, that's my tunnel into the next weird feature in this preview, because we now have copper horse armor. This was something that was notably missing. I mean, if we look at all of the copper items in the game, you can see we've got copper armor, we've got copper tools, but where is the copper horse armor? Apparently, people were asking this, and so Mojang has obliged by adding it. This is a leather horse armor, as you can see, and this is the copper horse armor, which now fits between it and the other 3 types. There are obviously iron horse armor, diamond horse armor, and gold horse armor, which are fit in an unintuitive way, but that's a point for a different time. And now copper horse armor is the worst of the metal horse armors, but better than leather. However, this is a bit of a silly point because leather horse armor can be crafted, and copper horse armor might be better, but currently cannot be crafted, and so it's going to fill a bit of a weird niche in my opinion for people who find horse armor in the wild but don't find anything better yet. But still, if you want to have a copper horse, you can. However, this kind of falls back into the same trap they just fixed with the lightning rod. We have these lovely new lightning rods now because obviously you want to have oxidized versions of it, but why is it that this will oxidize but not the armor on a horse, despite them both spending as much time out in the wild? And the answer is Mojang hasn't yet come up with an answer to how or even if copper armor and copper tools should oxidize, even though chests and everything else will. And is that something they're going to fix? Well, certainly not now. And speaking of things they're not going to fix right now, it's worth noting that when they brought out the copper horse armor in snapshot 25W31A, it actually came to Java yesterday and it's only on Bedrock now, they mentioned that the copper horse armor has a toughness of 4. This is something notable because we don't have toughness as a stat on Bedrock, but we do have the armor stat, and if you are in survival, let's go into that now, by the way. If you're in survival, you'll notice that your armor stat corresponds to how much armor the armor gives you. So 6 armor should correspond to 3 little chestplate icons above my hotbar, and there you go, you can see it does. Whereas 8 armor should correspond to 4 of those points, which it does in fact do. However, this has left a bit of an understatement about how much better diamond is than iron, and especially how much better netherite is than diamond. That's because right now, you might assume that with just 8 armor between them, netherite and diamond will give you the exact same damage reduction, and that's mostly true, but with the armor toughness stat now being in the game, supposedly it's been there the entire time, but armor toughness was added as part of the combat update, basically to make it so the armor didn't work flatly. That's because having a full set of armor would give you 80% damage reduction, which Jeb felt was too much, especially for large attacks, and so basically the larger a piece of damage gets, the less damage reduction your armor will do to it, until eventually it does next to nothing. Armor toughness prevents that degradation, and so in other words, armor is the damage stat that relates to most damage you will take. 8 armor is the same as 8 armor for, say, being hit by a zombie, but 3 armor toughness means that when you're hit by a mace or an enchanted sword, you'll get more damage resistance against that. Interestingly, I would say armor toughness isn't very intuitive to most players, and that even once you understand and look at the tables, it's still kind of crazy, but it is worth noting that toughness doesn't relate to durability or anything like that. What it instead relates to is how much large damage you can tank. So That's kind of fun, I guess. Speaking of things that are kind of fun, let's now move on to the shelf. They've made a few changes to the shelf, all of which are quite interesting in my opinion. But the first one is the fact that it can now no longer be, it now can waterlog, whereas before, if you tried to place it in water, it would do this. Now, if we grab a shelf, which I'm going to do, I can place it in the water and it actually flows with it. This is much better than before, in my opinion, but also the shelf has had a change so that if you place items inside of it, you'll actually get a, I did that wrong, you'll actually get a redstone signal from a comparator that corresponds to what you put in there. So the first slot, it kind of works like binary. The first slot will give you a signal strength of 4, the second slot will give you a signal strength of 2, and the third slot a signal strength of 1. And so if you want to get a signal strength of, say, 5, you put an item in here and an item in there, and that will give you a comparator signal strength of 5. This is useful for redstone contraptions, I imagine. It's an easy one-block way to do it. How will it be used? That's always the question you have to ask after the fact. But for now, I like this quite a bit. There's also quite a few other fun little quirks that are only on the Bedrock version of the game. So, for example, I want to point out the fact that Smokey Stack, who does a lot of data mining, has found that there are new options for vibrant visuals, particularly of how it relates to fancy water and all of these other options right here, including super fancy, by the way, which I think is a fun new idea. Is this just for internal development or is it open to the public? He does not know, but it is something that does signify that Minecraft is still working on vibrant visuals. You'll obviously know that if you've been following 1.21.100, the last update that's probably coming out next Tuesday, by the way. But if you've been following that update, you'll know it's focusing on vibrant visuals, but Minecraft didn't just release and forget about it. They're doing more work on it. And similarly, if you've been curious about the offhand changes that Mojang made, it does seem as though you can see that they've actually now put it into place with the Copper Golem. This means that the Copper Golem, at least theoretically, can use his offhand. And so does this mean that the Copper Golem is never going... Is the offhand only doomed to be useful for the Copper Golem? Personally, I think it's just another sign of things being worked out for mobs so that they work in the future. I think the offhand is still coming, but keep in mind that that work that came towards it last week was just for the Copper Golem, and that's something that's useful to know. And that is, there's a whole changelog that you can dive through if you want to learn about all of the other minor technical changes. They've got more blending for legacy chunks. They've got all sorts of other fun things that they have been working on. But I just want to point out, as far as the major ones go, those are the major minor tweaks in this Bedrock update. But it's not just a Bedrock preview that came out. We had a Java snapshot release yesterday, and so let's go over there, shall we? Oh, it's not looking very vibrant, but it does have a brand new menu screen, and I just tried to show it off, but I get a lot of Java players complaining that my menu load times are too fast. So just for you, I'll play it again in slow motion. Look at that. That's the new Minecraft Java loading menu, at least as of this snapshot. It's not mentioned anywhere, but it is a very big deal, at least in my opinion. And speaking of things that are a big deal in my opinion, we also have, very interestingly, the change to spawn chunks. One of Minecraft Java's golden rules that has been separate to the way that it works on Bedrock has been that they have always had spawn chunks which are always loaded in. So here's the deal. On both Java and Bedrock, just because you can see something, it doesn't mean it's loaded in. If there was a sheep or a minecart or a pig all the way over there, it wouldn't actually be simulating. So if I had a furnace running, nothing would be cooking until I get close enough to it. The distance that things actually simulate is called your simulation distance, and mine is set to 12 chunks right now, which means anything further than 12 chunks away, let's see if I can find a good example of this, anything further than 12 chunks away isn't actually going to move, and you also won't be able to see it in your world at all. And this means that the one exception to that rule is your spawn chunk, and this has just been true on Java since the beginning. This was supposedly because multiplayer servers needed to always have that spawn chunk loaded in so that you could join a server quickly, but Minecraft put out a pretty decent developer note explaining that spawn chunks incur a memory and performance cost for all players and have outlived their initial technical purpose of keeping the spawn area ready to quickly join into. That's why they were on Java and not Bedrock, because a lot of people were joining into worlds on Java and they wanted to be fast. However, they also want to recognize that spawn chunks have enabled a multitude of clever contraptions and farms throughout the years, so simply removing them without having any other mechanics in the game to enable these designs was never an option. We believe that the niche held by spawn chunks has now been filled by alternative methods of chunk loading, such as using portals or ender pearls, particularly with the changes in the snapshot to how the game loads these chunks. before the world starts ticking. And, you know, gotta say, very unfortunate now that spawn chunks are gone. I don't know what that podcast is going to rename itself, but more seriously, I think the deeper message we could say here is that Minecraft now has a force load command to make sure that chunks are loaded in. If you want to do technical things, you can just force load your chunk, your spawn chunk. But now every other Minecraft player, if you have your simulation distance set really, really low, because it does go as low as 5 chunks. If you have your simulation distance set to 5 chunks, you can only see an area of like 25 chunks around you, and then you would be unnecessarily loading in your spawn chunk, which was just inefficient. And so now you can force load chunks using a command. But this critically does mean that for survival players, where you presumably aren't going to be using that command, although it's Java, so who says what people are going to do in survival, but that does mean that you might have some issues with your world if you don't go in and specifically force load your spawn chunks. But how many people were utilizing the spawn chunks for pure survival? Not that many, but if that is you, make sure you stay aware of this. Next up, we have changes to the F3 menu. This is another huge one, because the debug menu, I think people have been asking forever for them to add it to Bedrock, but the simple explanation the developers always give is like, no, it's meant to be debug information just for helping to debug your game. That doesn't obviously stop speedrunners and whatnot from using it. I think there's some decent debate about whether debug is, you know, intentional gameplay behavior or not, but the reason a lot of people need the debug screen is because it will give you stuff like your XYZ coordinates or the amount of your frame rate and stuff like that. Really, really crucial piece of information, but now you can see there's far less information than there wasn't here before, because you have to press all of these buttons to enable them all. But basically, your F3 screen is customizable, and even deeper than that, if we press F3 and F5, we can choose what information goes on F3 at all. Right now, biome is set to off by default. We can turn it on, and then now we go to F3, and where is my biome? It's in that top left, just below my frame rate. That's very cool. But also, I could decide, instead of putting it in my, oh god, I gotta turn this off. Instead of putting the biome in my debug info, I could just have it always be on screen. And now, just like how the Bedrock version of Minecraft has the coordinates and days played be displayable on screen, you can do that with not just your biome, which is kind of fun, not just your chunk and your frame rate, so that's kind of fun, but you can do it with things like your game version, you can do it with things like your local difficulty, or you can do it with, even going crazier, the player position. Personally, I think it kind of sucks when you put player position up there. There's just too much information. All I really want to see is my XYZ, but still, Minecraft Java had to remove a feature to match Bedrock, the spawn chunks, and I think they removed it for good reasons on Java too. It's not just a parity thing, but rather than adding a feature to Bedrock, they removed it from Java, which, you know, not ideal, but hopefully that means we're getting the force load command. But then they've also improved the F3 menu, because right now I would argue for survival players the F3 menu is a mess, but you know, like, what's great is that soon you'll be able to actually choose what displays on here and what doesn't, and hopefully they'll they'll have some option for a player position that is actually just the player position. Personally, that's what I would love to see. You can also see stuff like TPS, you can see sound mood. There's all sorts of information in here that you might want to use, including, if we go for some of the craziest ones, we go for chunk borders, which is great. You can load these to be in your world at all times. I think this was previously possible with F3 plus G or something like that. But yeah, the fact that you can just enable that in a GUI is much, much better, at least if you are to ask me. And yeah, as you can see, this wasn't actually a spawn chunk, it's a fake, because this isn't the chunk border. You caught me. How did anyone find that one out? Anyway, so that is the changes they made to the Java version. Very, very big, very, very revolutionary, and hopefully a sign that some more of this customization, if it is used by enough Java players, will come to Bedrock. Or, I mean, ideally, even if it's not used by Java players, right? But anyway, with that said, let's now move on from my crazy chunk bordering world. In fact, just to prevent future me is going to get very confused if I don't turn these things off right now. So let's just go ahead, turn all of that off, and then move on to the next. Oh wait, if I press F3 now, I can leave this on all the time. That's handy. So yeah, being able to pick your F3 screen and being able to pick your not F3 screen is huge in my opinion. But we have one last thing to go into in this video, because now that we've seen by the way, also, this was the first snapshot they made in weeks, so it has all the new copper features. They work exactly the same as on Bedrock in most cases. There are a few exceptions, but they've all been fixed as of the most recent preview that you just watched a video mostly about, and that you're about to watch more of a video on, because the fifth part of this video relates to 1.21.110, which is the current presumed name for the update. It might very well end up being 1.21.120, but what's crucial to know is that regardless of the name of the update, so far it's looking very, very good. I decided to stack everything up in one place just to really get an idea of how much we have, and again, ignoring the different types of, copper golems and how much value they can bring by themselves, we have ourselves 10 separate copper features right here, plus 4 separate copper lightning rods, plus the wax versions, plus the copper golems, plus the fact that there's a brand new mob, plus the fact that there's 11 shelves. We already have what I think we could decently describe as a very good drop, I think, in the grand scheme of drops we've seen so far, and this is what has come out while they've been on holiday, for the most part, it seems like. And so maybe that means that actually there's a pipeline in Mojang, and so what's going to happen in August is basically next to nothing. But even if this update goes for a month of just minor bug fixes, I think what we would end up with at the start of September would be very, very good. But what's crazy is we might end up with even more content. Again, we now have about 4 or 5 more weeks worth of potential content, at least on the Bedrock version of the things. This is only the second beta preview for 1.21.110, and so we might see even more changes on top of the ones that you've just seen here. I think that's absolutely wild, and if you do too, well then that is half of the fun, isn't it? Because that has been everything you need to know about the Copper Drop's latest beta and preview. A lot of people do wonder, like, oh, Toycat, why didn't you cover the snapshot yesterday? And I do think that when we know there is going to be a beta in a week, I prefer to and I try to cover that, because sometimes there are odd differences, such as the fact that on Java, Course Armour has a toughness rating, which it does not seem to on Bedrock, such as the fact that, like, the lightning rods and stuff like that, there's very slight differences that I think are worth covering from the Bedrock side of things, because what we cover on this channel is mostly Bedrock, so that is why we're doing it, and that is hopefully an answer for that. And yeah, also in case you're curious, I did get back from my my Canada/Texas trip, and yeah, I also just want to mention I'm back, but also wildly, like, I don't know how to describe, I guess jet lagged is the word, but I slept for 12 hours and woke up exhausted, and I think that's like the most unfair piece of life. It's like, why is it that if you sleep for too long, you get tired, and why is it that your body still demands more sleep? It's like, wait, am I going to get more tired if I sleep more? Is there an amount of sleep where I would feel okay? I'm starting to feel like the answer is no, but that is why this is the end of the video, and if I said anything incoherent, I am very sorry for it, but I hope you all enjoyed it anyway, and I'll see you next week for the next beta preview, because this one has been awesome. I wouldn't expect massively anything from next one, but that's kind of a keep your expectations tiny, and maybe we won't even need to be whiny sort of thing. But yeah, with that said, thank you, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.